Hey y'all, and welcome back to another video of my creative life with Kelssweetie, where we read books and we make art. Today we are going over my June wrap-up. Is it a little late in the month that y'all are getting this? Yes. Mind your business. It was a great reading month. It should be a great video today because, to be honest, looking back, one, I had 2 DNFs. You're like, Kelsey, well, what makes that a great reading month? Because I'm learning the power of the DNF. Y'all are really going to be sick of me saying that. But I'm really proud of myself for this. But also, I think I have like 4, 5 stars this month. Because other than those DNFs, everything else, knocked it out the park. So excited to share it with you. Let's get into this intro because it's going to be a long one. Because there's a lot of books in here. As I mentioned in the intro, it was a month. It definitely was a month. But my reading must have really been a coping mechanism because I'm looking at this stack and it's far more than usual. I don't know, maybe it isn't. I think I'm just like shocked by how much is sitting next to me. I'm also shocked that I DNF'd 2 books. I am so excited to tell y'all about my DNFs. That's shady, I know. It's because I'm really proud of myself for learning how to DNF. I'm going to give them to you 2 at a time because there's no reason that we should spend a lot of time on this. Brewed with Love and Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute. Here's the thing. I know I'm not a romance girl, and I've learned romance YA really just is not my jam. I got lucky with To All the Boys I Loved. I think that's why I even gave this a chance, because I read the mess out of those books. I absolutely loved them. I read them back to back. I read them physically. This is before I found the power of an audiobook. So I thought, okay, you just need to find yourself another YA romance that you absolutely love. I worked on this mech. This is my first mech I ever worked on, period, within the book industry. So I picked this up. Am I going to keep it? Yes. Did I love it? Absolutely not. I got about 15% in, and the main character in here, not Zemina, but Sage, did not like her. You're a woman of color. I get that you're young, but she was sitting here plotting on getting Zemina, like, arrested. What? I didn't like that. I didn't like how she really was addressing any sort of these conversations. She felt extremely petty in her motivations, and it read as just like being petty, like just deal with your emotions. I was not a fan of that whatsoever, and for that it gave me an ick really early on, and so I couldn't continue with this. I'm gonna keep it because I am really proud of, I love the cover. First and foremost, this is a great cover, but I also love that, like, this is a representation of like my very first mech I ever worked on, and I'm really proud of it, so I'm keeping it. But I did not finish it whatsoever. And Highly Suspicious, Unfairly Cute. Talia Hibbert, I actually loved one of her romances. It was part of the Brown Sisters series that she did, and it was Get a Grip, Danny Brown. Loved it. I recommend that to anybody all the time, really, because I very much recognized myself in Danny Brown, and I loved her romantic interest entirely. And so I thought, oh, I'll pick up this book because I found it at the thrift store. Again, the motivations felt very stupid and childish to me, which of course they were childish. It's a YA novel, but still like this, oh, I hate you, but I don't really hate you type of thing, and I'm going to sit here and say actually extremely hurtful things to you just so that I don't have to deal with my feelings towards you, and, you know, the knowledge of knowing later on down the line you guys are going to have some romantic interests. It just wasn't good character building. It just wasn't that great. And the British accents, which I've mentioned in a recent video, this is my American showing, but I think that it's just, we have been nationalized and trained that hearing a British accent, I automatically think of high tea, high society, Pride and Prejudice, Bridgerton. These are things that come to mind when I hear a British accent. And so I couldn't take the narrator seriously throughout any of this, and I already wasn't taking you seriously because of the motivations in this. So I had to DNF it. It wasn't going to happen. I hate that for me. I hate it because, again, I feel like Talia Hibbert does a really great job of bisexual, body positive representation. And I know that the characters themselves, I did like where she was going with them, especially this like weird, the truth is out there type of black girl. Love that. Just it felt too young. It missed the mark with me. I think that I would recommend this to a younger, maybe even middle grade. I don't want to say that because middle grade doesn't exist anymore, but you guys get what I'm saying. Like I say middle grade meaning like 7th, 8th grader type of thing. I think what I would recommend this to. It just felt too young for me. Those are my DNFs. We're getting out of the way early. No need to spend much time on them. My first read of the month, Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle. I get it, guys. I get it. I get why you guys are constantly recommending this book. It's amazing. It's so good. I have to read Camp Damascus now. I didn't start off with that because I feel like it was going to ruin me, and not in a good way, and I already had some dark books on my June TBR. You know, it was Pride. I didn't want to hear about a conversion therapy camp during Pride. Maybe around Christmas they may get me. Just to bring down some of the cheer. I'm glad I started off with this though, because I feel like Chuck Tingle, especially in his like off-brand work, is very fun and very unserious, and I think that he brought some of that fun to this novel. I felt so like all of the characters in here were very genuine. I felt like the plot was something new in regards to the conversation regarding AI and the fight against it and horror. In regards to them, I think that it was something fresh. And I think that you feel for Misha, hearing about where, you know, his inspiration for his movies come from, that it comes from him working through his trauma of his life. But I never felt at any point that it was trauma for trauma's sake, or that it was putting salt in the wound. In regards to trauma in these conversations that are very, very real about coming out, about being in the closet, growing up as queer in the Midwest, and all of these different things that come up in the book. I mean, literally, this man is trying to rip his own heart out at one point. It was, I mean, amazing, bloody, gory, deliciously fun. But I don't feel like it was stereotypical either. I don't feel like any of the queer characters were stereotypes of themselves, which is very easy, unfortunately, to get into when you're trying to have campy fun. I say that, and I've said it before, I'm gonna say it again. Zeke, the main character's boyfriend. I read him as the black, gentle, giant bisexual of our main character, Misha's boyfriend of his dreams. That is how I read him throughout the entire book. This is very, like, buff, bear of, like, a man who, like, you're slightly like, like, he's given trade, but is the sweetest man in the world, most understanding, kind, gentle man in the world. That is how I read Zeke. We were literal pages from the end of this book when Tingle says, like some descriptor in regards to Zeke's hair, and it's long and it's blonde. And I'm like, you've ruined it. I don't like getting through an entire book or even a good portion of a book and coming to my own, like, conclusions on what a character looks like, and then an author throwing a descriptor in out of nowhere that ruins it, because then the entire first half or the entire book that you've read has been completely obliterated in regards to how you saw that character. If you're going to add descriptions, add them in the beginning. And if they're going to be very specific descriptions that are very clear as to the race or gender or whatever or makeup of this character, add them at the beginning. Do not add them at the end, because you've upset me. Because now this entire book that I've read, seeing this character as, I now have to try and rewrite the entire book to see it from how you wanted it to be seen, and I can't do it now. I can't do it now because I've already seen it a certain way. That is my only gripe on this novel whatsoever. Everything else in this book, loved it. Absolutely loved it. Loved even the false ending. I love how they came about that. I loved I even loved how they ended up kind of getting to their end. It didn't feel like a cheat. All of that. Loved it. Hated that. Remove that. It wasn't even a scene that was necessary. That's what's even more upsetting. It was not a scene that was even, it could have been taken out easily. So I'm going to petition that. When you reprint this, take that out. But I gave this 5 stars for sure. It was so enjoyable. I recommend it to anybody, period. I think that I didn't know what I was really getting into because based on the synopsis doesn't give much away, to be honest, about what's actually happening in the book. Good or bad, because I think that if more people knew what this book was about, that it's about AI and these horror characters that this director has made coming to life and coming for him, and him working through it and learning how to defeat them through having to deal through his trauma. And what does this mean in regards to the entertainment industry? What does this mean in regards to rainbow capitalism? What does this mean in regards to queer horror and where that even comes from and the popularity around it? All of these discussions come up in here, and I wasn't expecting that, and it was a great surprise. I absolutely loved it. I think in tone, it kind of felt like the Pearl franchise. Like, that's how I kind of read it, was like in that same vein, like it was being shot that way, and that was a lot of fun. Absolutely loved it. 5 stars across the board, except for that last part. My next read was completely different, absolutely different tone. That was Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. I have been meaning to read this for quite some time. Obviously, being Black, being queer, I need to read some James Baldwin. Have I read any before this book? Bits and pieces, as I was in AP English in high school, but I haven't read a ton, and I've always been very upset about that. It's something I should do. I just know that I have issues with the classics sometimes, and so I don't really get to them as often as I should. I found before I left my last internship, we were able to get some books. They had this special edition of Giovanni's Room, which is just gorgeous. Still in love with this cover. I think, again, I've said it before, I think that Black classics don't receive a colorful enough treatment. Toni Morrison deserves more than just a gem color and some gold script across the cover with the spine that's like got some stripes of color in it. Like, she deserves so much more than just that. The paperbacks of those covers are amazing and coveted for a reason. Just slapping a historical stock picture onto a cup. Come on now. This is what we need. This is the energy we need going forward. And so this gave me an excuse to sit here and finally read it. I'm happy I did. Baldwin was smoking that good stuff when he wrote this, because it's so modern, it's so relatable, it's so timeless, and as I've said, heartbreakingly so, because the experiences that are in this book, the anguish, the self-hatred, the constant need to just want to be loved and feel safe that we experience from Giovanni are things that are not new. They're not new, and they're still happening today. And the things that, Giovanni's performance, I say performance because this read like a film. I know you're going to get sick of hearing me say that. I need an adaptation immediately of this, and I want Barry Jenkins to do it. Barry Jenkins, director of Moonlight, get on Giovanni's Room, because in all honesty, Moonlight is Giovanni's Room. Some of the same feature. Okay, I'm sitting there with that. Or maybe even a Les Berman, the guy who did the Romeo plus Juliet franchise and everything. I don't know, a double feature creature, like, I don't know. But that's the energy I wish that they would give Giovanni's Room, because Giovanni's performance, his spiral of simply just going insane from wanting to feel loved, wanting to feel safe, keeping his heart out of the equation for so long, and simply only allowing his body into these relationships because he knows that he lives in a world where he could never truly find love. Nearly getting love, experiencing that love from somebody like David, who is in the closet, who is still coming to terms with his sexuality, is still not proud of his sexuality, is in love with a woman, because let's be honest, David's bisexual. I don't doubt that he was in love with Hella. I forget what her name is. Helly? What is her name? It's not in the back here. But it's Hella or Helly or something like that. I definitely feel like he was in love with her. I think that, of course, this was written in, 1954? 1956? The conversation of being bisexual was not in the room with us. So that wasn't a possibility. But David, I do feel like, was bisexual. now reading this in 2025. Are we ready for that conversation? How about the fact that, like, y'all sit there and put men who are bisexual in a corner of, no, you actually gay. Y'all do that. Just like y'all put women who are bisexual, femmes who are bisexual, in the category of, nah, you actually straight and you just had one woman. Nobody wants to talk about that. This book brings those things up before those conversations were even thought of to be had. I am so impressed. The emotion, the back and forth. I mean, even at one point you're sitting there and you're like, David, honestly, I think I don't like you. Because did you lead Giovanni along? Why would you allow him to put himself in this situation like this? Why would you treat him that way? But at the same time, you're afraid of Giovanni because of how much his obsession is. I mean, literal obsession. And allows himself to literally go into the drain because of it. Being trapped inside of a room, one's love and identity and self being trapped inside of these confines of a room. And that, of course, is Giovanni's room. But Giovanni is willing and ready and able to live his life outside of that room. The issue is that David's not. And Giovanni gets the hard end of the stick, like, you trapped me in here. And Giovanni's like, you trapped yourself in here. What's that got to do with me? And why am I the one who's paying for it? Loved it. Oh, I recommend it so much. I get it. I get why y'all continue to put this on your Pride book list. I was like, girls, let's get a new book. No. Read this one. Read this one until the narrative changes. Read this one till the narrative changes. Absolutely loved it. Can't recommend it enough. House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. Y'all, I like this one. I know that's saying a lot because I DNF'd The Year of the Witching earlier this year by Alexis Henderson because of my issues with Puritan witches. I had a come to Jesus moment on it. But I actually really did like this one. It was giving U-Haul in the most gothic sense. U-Haul lesbian in the most gothic sense of the word. Now, I will say, I gave this around a 3.5. Reason being, I do feel like, one, the ending didn't sit right with me. The fact that they went through all of this and at the end, their literal survival is hinging on a man, what? That you just met? Why? Why did we write that? Why is that what was written? I don't get that choice. I don't like that whatsoever. So that was weird. And then I also I could not really understand, and I don't think it was explained well enough for me, regarding why they become blood maids. I think in my mind, I had started to think, well, they answered it because back then there were actual blood maids. Like, people would, it wasn't like, I'm going to slice you open type of thing, but it was like a little prick or here and there. Because people thought that, like, in all honesty, like, the blood of somebody else who had really good blood was going to revitalize you and whatever the case was. So I thought that that was the pretense that these women enter this relationship or this employment under. It's not. They know for good and darn well that they're getting sucked dry in these circumstances. And I can't really, they address it, but I don't think they addressed it in a way that I was happy enough with, that, like, you're going to do what you need to do in order to survive. And these women who come in needed to survive. I feel that. I understand it. I just don't feel like it was addressed as well as I would have liked in order to truly and utterly sympathize and rationalize their decision to be blood maids. It just didn't feel rational enough considering what they were experiencing while they're in the house. And this is before they really start to kind of go under the spell of the House of Hunger and Elisabeth and what they're experiencing. Now, there were some gory, for this to kind of be, it kind of teeters, it's more adult, but it teeters in the YA situation. I was not expecting some of these very gory scenes and how crazy one of them goes. Like, absolutely bonkers. And she ends up approaching, what's her name? Marion, in this standoff of a scene, which I mean, it was great. You could see it entirely. I think that scene alone and some of the things that happened after that really, really put this into the realm of horror and not simply just like one of these vampire fantasy novels. I liked it. And that's, again, saying a lot because I'm not somebody who likes vampire stories. I'm just not a fan of the gothic. And this was so much fun, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm glad I did, because I really wanted to give Alexis Henderson a win after not liking The Year of the Witching. So we're back in it. If she releases something else, I'll read that. Yeah, I loved it. I think that it definitely is really great. And again, I mentioned this before, and I think my February wrap up, where I had kind of started this, I really do like that they make mention of the AIDS epidemic happening in regards to her brother and the sickness that he's experiencing. They don't call it that, but the things that happened to him, how he kind of got this sickness, he was also queer and everything, really lends to the fact that this sickness really was it was not just one single point in time necessarily, but there were times when there just wasn't a conversation or any sort of information whatever about it, because historically, and I appreciated that, and I don't think it was heavy-handed. I think it was written in a way that was heartbreaking and unfortunate, and but still very much like I appreciated that portion of the novel. So House of Hunger, definitely, I definitely like this. I had a great time reading this. Glad I did. Portal Mania. This book. So this wasn't on my official TBR for June. I ended up reading this after I'd pre-ordered it or something in the mail. I thought that I was going to maybe read it during July. Didn't realize how queer this was. It absolutely talks in depth about queerness and understand your queerness later on in life, how Gen X, that generation, is trying to deal with realizing their queerness later on in life, how the people around them are dealing with that. Conversations in regards to extreme duality politics within a country. I had to take some breaks because it was hitting the nail on the head. Absolutely. This is the most appropriate novel I've probably read all year in regards to what we're experiencing right now in America, in regards to campaigns, politics, elections, parties, all of that. That is absolutely something that this book addresses and angered me in a lot of different times because of it. It also addresses a lot of marital abuse in it. I think that it addresses so much that I was reading some reviews and some people were like, honey, do you hate men? Because the men in this book are deplorable. The husbands in this book are deplorable. I had to come home after finishing one of these books, one of these stories, because it's a collection of stories. Look my own partner in the face and go, if you were to ever do something like that, I don't care how much I currently love you. And there's a part of me that goes, you would never do that. But you want to know something? I don't know anymore. There are portions of this book that are just hard, very, very hard. Intersex conversations, asexuality conversations. How are you, conversations of being in a relationship with a woman who has figured out that she is asexual later on in life. How, the husbands, at least in this book, don't know how to deal with that anymore and lead into a lot of sexual abuse because of it. Oh my God, the conversations near the end in regards to parents and their children not living up to the expectations and ideas that they thought they would have when having children, and therefore are proving the point of the fact that you just wanting a child does not make you fit to be a parent. That sometimes parenthood isn't in the card for some people because they really haven't figured out what it takes to actually be a parent and be supportive and be ready. One of the stories has to do with a woman who handles horribly trying to come to terms with the fact that her child is autistic and does not know how to deal with it whatsoever and doesn't end up dealing with it in the long run. We have another story of a woman who these portals are popping up all over their town. It's a smaller town, and her family wants to go inside of these portals to experience these new worlds. And she is like, what is wrong with the world we have here? What is wrong with the world that I built for you? And literally sabotaging their tries to be in these portals, and her taking it so personally and not realizing what's best for them or any of these conversations. Another one has to do in the very end that has to do with her child becoming a bird and all of these different things. this attacked so many different conversations in each one of its stories, and each one was heavy hitting in my opinion. I think that I had to take pauses during some stories in here because they were just hard to read, and the way that Debbie Urbansky covers them are just amazing. I really recommend it, with of course a ton of trigger warnings. I think that a lot of people aren't talking about this book because the cover, while great, isn't a good representation of what this book is giving, in my opinion. I think that a lot of people see this, and even reading the synopsis, it doesn't go too far into detail about what's being covered, and I don't think people know what to get out of it, and so they're not automatically picking it up. Crazy enough, this was extremely appropriate for me to be reading during Pride, but I wouldn't have known that just reading the synopsis, to be honest. Oh, this was a 5-star, if you couldn't have told from my review. Another heavy hitter that I needed to take a little time from, Red X by David Demchuk. Okay, I think I'm late on this one. It's been in my to be read by TBR list, I want to say maybe for 2 years now, and I finally picked it up. I loved it, but in a very heartbreaking way. It was gorgeous. It was amazing. The story of this monster who is killing these gay men in Toronto's gay village over decades of years is difficult, but it's also haunting, and it's very much a ghost story and a horror in a very, honestly, not in an American way. I got very much Ringu vibes. I got, without the transphobia, y'all. I got very much in horror in regards to the yokai from Japanese ghost stories and horror films, in the sense of this red notebook that is filled with these souls and these hauntings, and this idea that touching this thing has sullied you. And of course, this is a conversation of, it's not just a metaphor of the AIDS epidemic, but it's actually happening in parallel to the AIDS epidemic, happening at the very same time. And the things that David Demchuk is talking about in here, from his own experiences, and that was another thing that I wasn't expecting in the writing, is that it blends this fourth wall of Demchuk being a character in his own story, as a narrator, as an author. What's the difference between the two? And also combining some of those things that I have learned I really do love, from Changing All Stars, from The Devil in Silver. I see a recommendation video coming up in the future where actual facts and stats and experiences are embedded in the story as you're telling this fictional story at the same time, to give proof and life to what you're reading. So much of this book was sexy and horrible and disgusting and heartbreaking and sad, and some of the same things that we experienced in regards to Giovanni's Room, and that heartbreak and that, as I put, Oscar-worthy spiral, is something we experience from the monster as well in Red X. And reading it with the audiobook, out of here. Loved it. Because the monster has a Irish accent or Scottish accent, and I'm like, is that you, Remick? It was so amazing and involved, and the characters within this book are so diverse. One of the characters in here, who I was surprised to kind of see, I don't think that I was expecting her. She was a black mask DJ coming up during the 80s and DJing in these these gay bars that are full with white men, and what came with that experience. Because of course, we, within the queer community, there is racism that runs rampant, there is misogyny that runs rampant within the queer community. It's not just everybody's loving everybody. We would love that, but that's not the case. That's not realistic. I appreciated that this was moving through time in many different ways. How it moved through time, it felt haunting. It read like a movie. It read like an A24 movie. It did. It read like that. It read like an Ari Aster film. The way that the scenes that were talked about were shot. And I mean shot in the means of how they were written, but it read like a movie shot by shot. I love this. I can't recommend it enough. I honestly wish that I could see this being recommended much more often, because it deserves so much more, in my opinion. And I think that there were a lot of portions in here as well in regards to y'all know I love a good interior. And it switches back and forth between narration from the author and the story at hand. And at one point it crosses over. At another point, it even has like these portions within it that look like this, which was also interesting because while I was listening to the audiobook, I was also reading in some portions. And in a page like this, not here is what's said over the audio, but he's here is what's said in the actual book. Do I know why? I don't know. And you have to ask, like, I love that sort of experience where it's like we want you to take all of the media and consume it. I think there's a lot of attention put to this, and considering the subject matter, I appreciate that. I think I was preparing myself to be wrecked by reading this book, and while, again, I think in a very different execution, but in the same feeling of Barrier Gaze talked about these very heavy topics, it was talked about with such care that I didn't walk away from it spent in a way that felt like, God, like, I don't want to read again. Like, there's so much happening in the world and so much happening within our lives and stuff that sometimes reading a book like this could feel like, God, I'm just adding salt in the wound. But instead, it didn't come off that way. It felt like your heart was in it, but it didn't take all of you. And I appreciated that personally. I know that some people look for that experience. But I personally don't think that it dampened the impact it had just because it didn't just simply, demolish me. So, absolutely loved it. Recommend it entirely, constantly. Read Red X. We're getting closer to the end, y'all. We're nearing my final book. This was my book club read of the month for the Sweethearts Book Club. Check us out down in the description, both on Fable, as well as we have a discussion every single month in the Discord. This month we won't be having one because I'm part of the readathon and I was running behind because of just so much happening. But we are going to start back up in August, so make sure you join us so that you don't miss anything. We've already kind of picked our book for August, so I'm looking forward to that. This was our read for this month, Eat the Ones You Love by Sarah Maria Griffin. I enjoyed this. Here's the thing. I think that this last month was far too good that a book like this didn't have a chance. I did enjoy it. I'm going to be keeping it. Really did like the storyline, and I especially love the setting. The setting of this book takes place in a basically dilapidated mall, which I've learned I love a horror that's taking place in a mall. There is something about malls that are unsettling in this day and age as a millennial, because I grew up during one of the last generations that got to experience the mall. An enclosed mall. I'm not talking about those pedestrian malls. We're not talking about the Grove. We're not talking about the Americana. We're not talking about a pedestrian mall. We're talking about a literal indoor mall that was at its height. People were in it, everything. And now so many of these malls are deserts, especially in small towns, especially in places that don't have a ton of people in them. And even in places where there are a ton of people. Here in LA, there are malls that are deserted, and that's weird considering where the city is constantly overflowing with people. Really in love with the setting for this. I felt like it was just creepy. It was very creepy. And creepier still is that this entire book is narrated from a serial killing plant. Let that sink in, because that really made this book very creepy, and I loved it. I think before, when I first started reading it, I was just kind of like, okay, so it's giving Little Shop of Horrors. Yes and no, because the entire book, because of the pollen that comes off of this orchid, this alien plant, he can basically go inside of you and follow you home and know all of your thoughts and know everything that you're doing. He's omnipresent because pollen is a part of him. He's inside of you. And that's his biggest thing that basically can attack you. I think that this is a start into the conversation of something further than the mushroom horror that we saw so much of with The Last of Us and 5 million other things that came out recently. We are moving into plant horror where it's talking about pollen and the fact that certain plants put off hormones that can make you aggressive, can make you feel a certain way and everything. We don't talk about the fact that plants are actually extremely scary when it comes to the conversation of if they could, they would. Because there's so many things in regards to plants that we don't even know yet. I really love that idea because it actually is extremely scary. I loved that this plant was living in this mall that had become dilapidated and had taken over and where its roots were. I even loved this pet that they kind of had in our main character, what's her name? Nev. And I also love the conversation regarding Nev's depression and lack of self-worth and how she found herself being this pet for this plant. Shell is a character that I didn't feel like was dynamic enough, and I wasn't much of a fan of, to be honest. I did love Jen. That was an ex-girlfriend of Nev's and ends up being a very important part of the story. And I love her build-up within the story. Even these minor characters of other friends who work within the mall, I love them as well. I felt like there was good character development regarding that. A majority of this book is talking about Shell's experience. And I did not care for Shell. I did not feel like there was a lot of character development there. And I wasn't a big fan of who she was as a character anyways, or a personality. I think that some of the decisions she was making and some of the things she was doing were just like, why are you doing that? That doesn't make any sense. So I think that Shell being that type of character made me kind of dislike this book a little more because you are getting a lot of her like background and her story, yes, from the point of view and the narration of the plant, but it's all through her eyes, and I just wasn't a fan of it. I think honestly, if that might have been taken out, or we would have just had a different type of character than Shell, I could have enjoyed this book a lot more because I think there was a lot going for it. The other thing that I wasn't a big fan of is there are some plot holes. I think there's some conversation in regards to like, what does the ending mean? Did they win? What is this? And I think that it left too many questions for it to just simply feel like, oh, it's supposed to be open-ended. It kind of didn't feel that way. And I think also there were some portions in regards to a survival of a certain character that I was just a little bit like, coming from the point of view of how that went down, you shouldn't have survived that. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So, again, I think there's some plot holes here and there. Not enough for me not to enjoy the book at all and not recommend it whatsoever. But I just think there are certain things that could have either been taken out or done better where I would have really loved this book. And that's slightly disappointing because I'm just like, oh, so it was all there. We were nearing it. We just weren't there yet. So I did like this. I think I gave it like a 3.5 or so. Nearing a 4 just wasn't exactly there because of those reasons, but it had a lot going for it. The final book of June, y'all, I'm so surprised at how many books I read this month, was Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily Austen. I finally read it, y'all. Hello, everyone. Obviously, this is editing Kelsey coming at you live. I'm sitting here editing this wrap up, and the last 10 minutes of this video, which has my outro, as well as my last book of the month, no sound. Absolutely no sound. I am just running my mouth and waving around a book, and you cannot hear a thing. Why is that, you may ask? My mic died. My mic died. Hadn't charged it in a while, which all things considered, DJI, I haven't charged this mic once since I got it. The charging capability on this is amazing, but I was playing with fire. That's beside the point. Y'all are getting this very strange outro for this video because I'm just not going to scrap an hour's worth of footage, which all intents and purposes looked fine, sounded fine, and all of that. I just don't want to do this again. So y'all are gonna get a quick review and a quick outro. Apologies, y'all. I hope you enjoyed the first portion of this video. Up until this point, I am trying a new camera lens, so it may look a little bit like a fisheye, which I know is something different. I'm still testing it out. Love the lighting though that I'm kind of doing. I don't know if my next video that has me sitting doesn't have that kind of blurred fisheye effect, you know that I probably just am going without it. Okay, let's get into this last book review. I ended up in the final hour of June reading Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead. It was good. I mean, I can see why a lot of people end up saying a lot, like really recommend it and everything. I get it. It's existential. I'm gonna have a big but on that though. I guess reading it as a Black woman though, it's not even throughout the entire novel, to be honest. It's at the end when the police get involved. And this is something that I kind of have been seeing a lot with mental health novels, and it's kind of annoying me, to be honest, because the same thing happened in Luster, where these mental health novels are talking about women having mental health issues, having depression, having lack of worth issues. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the entire story does not need this whatsoever. At the end, police get involved. Out of nowhere, just completely. And while I understand and appreciate a conversation in regards to the police and their lack of training in regards to mental health, obviously, because at the end of this novel, I basically spent the entire time with my face screwed up because these investigators were idiots who couldn't recognize a breakdown or depression or anything that was disassociation whatsoever. It just felt out of place to the entire rest of the novel. And it became the entire reason for the end of the novel and the conflict resolution for the end of the novel. And it's like, we got through an entire book before this happened, and all of a sudden this is what we were leading to when nothing else in the book said that we were leading to this location. I don't know. It felt thrown in, and I have the same problem with it that I had when I read Luster, that it felt misplaced. And the other problem that I have with that is honestly the other side of the spectrum of what I had a problem with in regards to Luster, which was the fact that it is very much you're a white woman and you would have definitely gotten in far more trouble had you not been. As opposed to what we read in Luster, and what I hated about Luster is that this police brutality is thrown in, lives are literally put at risk, and it was for nothing. It wasn't even, some weird evidence came up in this murder case and now we're looking at you about it. It was just, you're Black in a neighborhood we think you shouldn't be in. Now your life's at stake. And it was just kind of like, what? We spend the entire novel hearing about the main character and her battle with depression, basically beating her own self up, trying to find a reason to live. And then we get this ending that's just thrown in there and not even addressed. And the same thing happens here as well in its own way, but with a white woman. And in a way, because I'm a Black woman reading this, I'm like, this is supposed to be a conversation about mental health. And while, yes, the police are not equipped for it, honey, you crashed out bad. And you low key kind of in a aim of self-harm wanted them to like arrest you, to cuff you, to book you. And it's like, if a Black woman had ever tried that, if a woman of color ever had tried half of the stuff that this woman tries, there would be no end to the story. So it left a bad taste in my mouth because I was just kind of like, I liked everything up until now. But there was no delicacy, there was no information that also had Emily Austen going, yes, I'm completely aware, self-aware of the character we're talking about dealing with this issue of the police and her mental health and crashing out and this, that, and the third. There was none of that. And again, I feel like this is something that's been happening a lot lately with me, is that I've not been seeing people, while recommending this book, while reviewing this book, talk about that. And it's a big thing. Another thing, I didn't like the last, I want to say, paragraph of the book was so weird. Like how it completely ended. I was just like, we could have left that out. Like, I get that it was supposed to be, I guess, perseverance, but it was a weird metaphor after everything that had happened. I would have been happy with that part taken out, and then I would have been happy with just where the ending was going anyways. Another thing that I wasn't really loving is that her brother was dealing a ton with self-hatred because of him dealing with his identity issues. And it's like, we find some of that out, she kind of comes to terms with it. We never hear about it again. We never hear about if her brother ends up getting any help, getting any therapy, anything. Like, at all. We get nothing whatsoever. Once it's revealed why he's struggling so much with his depression, which there's many clues as to why. But I'm just like, what? You threw that in there for what? What are we just for what? I don't know, because there was no closure on it at all. There wasn't even a slight bit of closure. So that was upsetting. I really did like this book. I really did like it. And I get why people recommend it. And I think that in a lot of different ways, it's a fantastic book, especially in the conversations of Catholicism and depression and generations and generational depression. And I love that conversation, of course, between her parents and their depression, her father and his depression, how they were dealing with both of their children. All of these things. I'm just not happy with that ending. I'm just not happy with basically the last quarter of the book, with what she gets herself into, how it was kind of written, and all the things that are not said about a lot of different things, and especially how they leave her brother and how the final literal sentences were. Like, that ruined it for me because it didn't match the rest of the book at all. So that was upsetting. I think I ended up giving this book nearly a 4. It was fine. It's a middle of the road, a higher middle of the road book rec for me, just because of those things. But I can also see that I'm somebody who's constantly psychoanalyzing everything she reads and everyone she knows. And so for me, a book that literally is about psychoanalysis and its characters, I'm going to look at every single hole you may be having in your plot. Instead of any other book where I may be like, okay. I mean, I didn't like this, but all right. So that's how I ended the month. I'm not upset with it. I'm glad it was not a waste of time whatsoever. I know that that review maybe what it seemed like I hated it. I did not. I was just very upset at the ending. But yeah, that was my last book of the month. I ended up fitting it in last second before the readathon started. But I had a great reading month last month, all things considering, of DNFs and disappointing endings and disappointing characters. Almost everything that I read basically was fantastic. I mean, I think I had 3 5-stars last month. I think that's what it was. So that's crazy for 1 month. If you liked today's video, before, I lost my audio and I had to basically bootleg this ending, please give me a subscription. I swear I don't lose my audio ever. So there's a lot of fun here. We talk about books. We talk about weird books. We talk about psychoanalysis in those books. We talk about horror in many different ways. That's what we talk about around here. But if you like today's video, please subscribe down below and give this video a like. I will see y'all in the next one. Bye.